It all started with an empty coffee mug and an ache in my chest that had nothing to do with my heart. I was 73 years old, and lately, the silence of the house had become a second skin, clinging to me. The very walls, once a canvas for a lifetime of memories with my husband, Owen, now seemed to press in, suffocating me. I ran a hand over the cold countertop, a small rebellion against the quiet. This was my home, and I was going to fill it with a new kind of noise. A purposeful noise. The first step came that morning, a whisper of a plan hatched while sorting through old photographs. My daughter, Clara, had been by my side, her presence a balm on the loneliness. Unlike her brother, Daniel, Clara saw me not as a burden but as a person, still whole. She was helping me go through old belongings, deciding what to keep and what to let go. "Are you sure you want to get rid of this, Mom?" she asked, holding up a framed photo of Owen and me on our wedding day. I took the picture from her, a smile touching my lips. "I'm not getting rid of the memories, dear. I'm just making space for new ones." The house, with its 4 bedrooms and a garden I tended personally, was a beautiful relic of a different time. Owen and I had bought it when the children were small, and it had been the heart of our family for over 40 years. But after Owen's passing 5 years ago, it had become a mausoleum of sorts. Every room held a ghost of a conversation, a quiet echo of a shared laugh, a memory so vivid it hurt. My son, Daniel, and his wife, Veronica, had made it their mission to convince me to sell. "Mom, it's just too much for you," Daniel would say, his voice thick with a fake concern I had grown to despise. "A condo would be so much more manageable." He and Veronica were always stopping by to assess my well-being, which inevitably meant a critique of my independence. They talked about my finances, my health, my ability to live alone, their words a constant, subtle erosion of my confidence. Their visits were like a performance, a carefully choreographed dance of condescension and control. But today, with Clara's kind eyes on me and a new idea budding in my mind, their words seemed to hold less weight. I took a sip of my now cold tea and looked at the photo again. Owen had always told me I was the strongest woman he knew. A separate person with my own dreams and desires. I had forgotten that part of me for a long time, but now it was stirring, stretching, ready to awaken. A few days later, a sharp ring of the doorbell announced Daniel and Veronica's arrival. They came bearing a sugar-free, perfectly manicured pie, a gesture of caring that felt more like a reminder of my supposed fragile health. Veronica, with her thin lips and sharper stare, handed me the container. "No sugar," she announced, as if she were a doctor delivering a diagnosis. "Come on in," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. While Veronica settled herself on the sofa, Daniel began his usual inspection of the house. He walked from room to room, his gaze scrutinizing every corner for a flaw. "Mom, how long ago did you call the plumber? There's a stain on the hallway ceiling. Looks like a leak." "There's no leak, Daniel. It's the shadow of the elm tree outside the window. It's always been there." I tried to keep the impatience out of my voice. It was a wasted effort. He frowned, unconvinced. "I can get my man to check it out. You know, little problems can turn into big expenses." After his tour of the house, Daniel pulled a folder out of his briefcase. "Mom," he began, in the same tone he used with his own daughter. "I've reviewed your bank statements for the last 3 months, and frankly, I'm concerned." My breath hitched. I had never given him access to my accounts. "How did you get my statements, Daniel?" "That's not important. What is important is that you're spending too much. Why did you send $500 to that online store last month?" The anger, hot and sharp, rose in my chest. "It was a gift for my granddaughter, Emily," I said, my voice tight. "A bicycle for her birthday. A gift from Clara and me. $500 is too much for a child's gift, Mom. Besides, Emily already has a bicycle." "No, she doesn't. The one you and Veronica gave her was a tricycle. She's 6 now, she's outgrown it." Daniel and Veronica exchanged a look, a silent agreement that I was, once again, confused. "Anyway," Daniel continued, completely ignoring my comment, "I think you need help managing your finances. Since Dad died, your spending has become less predictable. Like that cruise you booked last year. $700 for a week on a ship. That's just reckless. That cruise was a gift for Clara and her family. We had a wonderful time. That's exactly what I'm talking about, Mom, Daniel said, his voice lowering to a conspiratorial whisper, as if explaining something very simple to a very slow child. You can't just throw money around. Who knows how many years you have left to live? You have to think about the future. What future, Daniel? The one where I sit in this house afraid to spend a dime without your permission? Veronica coughed delicately. Rose, dear, we're just worried about you. Maybe you should think about something more appropriate for your age. They wanted me to sell the house. I saw it then, the truth laid bare. They wanted to liquidate the most valuable asset I owned, the one Daniel had been circling for years. The memory of Owen's face on our 30th anniversary, full of love and trust, flashed in my mind. He wouldn't have let anyone talk to me this way. I took a deep breath. I'm doing just fine in this house, I said, my voice firm. And I don't plan to sell it. Daniel quickly interjected. No one's talking about selling right now. But you should start thinking about it. The real estate market is booming. What about the beach house, Rose? Veronica jumped in, her voice dripping with false concern. Have you even been there once in the last 2 years? Owen and I had bought the beach house the year before he died, a sanctuary where we planned to spend our retirement. I hadn't been there in a long time. Too many memories lived in its walls. But that didn't mean I was ready to part with it. Mom, the cabin is just sitting idle, losing value. You pay taxes, insurance, utilities. It's all money down the drain. I'll think about it, I said, knowing it was the only way to end the conversation. I'd considered selling it before, but for my own reasons, not at Daniel's insistence. He, however, seemed satisfied that his words were having an effect. There's something else, he said, pulling another document from the folder. I spoke to Mr. Burton, our family lawyer. He thinks you should get a power of attorney. Just in case, you need help making important decisions. The blood drained from my face. A power of attorney for you, I assume. It's just a precaution, Mom. You're not getting any younger, and sometimes you have to act quickly, like when selling a house or a beach house. He was almost laughing at his own audacity, but I wasn't amused. I don't think I need a power of attorney, Daniel, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. I'm perfectly capable of managing my own affairs. It's just insurance, Mom. What if something happens to you, he insisted. Then I'll call you. Or Clara. Daniel's face tightened at the mention of my daughter. He had always looked down on Clara's life choices. She'd chosen to be a gardener at a botanical garden, a career he considered a waste of her college education. Clara, he scoffed. Mom, she can barely manage her own finances. How can she help you? A wave of protectiveness rose in me. Clara is doing just fine. She's happy. Can you say the same? Daniel looked as if I had slapped him. Veronica placed a supportive hand on his shoulder. We're not here to discuss Clara, she said coldly. We're talking about your well-being, Rose. No, I said, standing up. You're talking about my money. And I think we should end this conversation. Daniel stood up too, his face flushed with restrained anger. Mom, you're being irrational. I'm trying to help you. I didn't ask for your help, Daniel, I said, my voice low. And I certainly didn't give you permission to look at my bank statements. How did you get access to them in the first place? He fumbled for a moment, mumbling something about Mr. Burton helping him. I felt a new resolve hardening inside me. Mr. Burton had no right to give you information about my accounts without my consent. I'll call him tomorrow. There's no need to bother him, Daniel said quickly. I was just trying to make sure you were okay. You so rarely share the details of your life with me. Because it's my life, Daniel, I said, meeting his gaze directly. And I will live it as I see fit. The rest of their visit was a tense, silent affair. When they finally left, leaving an untouched pie behind, I leaned against the front door and took a long, deep breath. My heart was pounding, but it was a different kind of beat. Not one of fear, but of an unexpected, exhilarating freedom. The first part of my plan had just begun. That first night, after the tense conversation with Daniel and Veronica, I felt a kind of quiet rebellion settle in my bones. I was tired of playing the part they had assigned me, the frail, confused widow who needed to be looked after. I was 73 years old, and I was going to live my life on my own terms. My son had just become the first step on that new path. The next morning, the day was bright and the air was crisp. As I sipped my coffee, I found myself thinking about Clara. My daughter was the complete opposite of her brother. Where Daniel was calculating and ambitious, she was spontaneous and compassionate. While he sought material success, she found her joy in simple things, in the feel of the earth under her hands, the scent of a blooming flower. She was a gardener, a profession Daniel always scoffed at. I remembered a particularly hurtful comment he'd made after Clara announced her career choice. How can you spend 4 years in college just to end up digging in the dirt? Now, I felt a rush of pride for my daughter, for the courage it took to follow her heart. I decided to pay her a surprise visit at the botanical garden where she worked. It was a 20-minute drive from my house, a tranquil oasis of greenery and quiet. As soon as I entered through the main gate, I was greeted by the familiar scent of damp earth and blooming flowers. I knew I would find Clara in the rose garden. It was her favorite, the place she tended with special care. And there she was, a wide-brimmed straw hat shading her face, her hands moving deftly over a rose bush. She looked so natural, so at peace, that my heart swelled with love. "Mom," she exclaimed when she saw me, her face lighting up. She pulled off her gloves and rushed to hug me, smelling of earth and fresh air. "You're early today. I thought I'd catch you at work," I said with a smile. "Do you mind?" "Of course not. Let me finish up this section, and we can go for tea." I sat on a nearby bench and watched her work. Her movements were full of confidence and love, a stark contrast to Daniel's frantic energy. When she finished, she joined me, and we walked to the small cafe near the entrance. As we settled at a table with cups of herbal tea and fresh blueberry muffins, Clara looked at me, her gaze gentle and perceptive. "Something's wrong, Mom. You look like you've decided something for yourself." I had always marveled at her ability to read my emotions. Daniel only saw what he wanted to see, but Clara always saw what was truly there. I told her about Daniel's visit, about the bank statements and the power of attorney. With every word, her face grew more serious. "That's out of line, Mom," she said when I finished. "He has no right to interfere in your life like this." "I know," I said, feeling a surge of pride. And yesterday was the first time I really let him know it. I told her what I'd said, that it was my life, and I'd live it as I saw fit. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I'm proud of you, Mom. I know how hard it is to stand up to Daniel." We finished our tea, and Clara showed me her new orchid collection in the greenhouse. We spent another hour walking through the garden, talking about her work, my classes, and my life. As we entered the warm, humid air of the greenhouse, I asked about her family. "How are Adam and Emily?" Her face brightened at the mention of her husband and daughter. "They're great. Adam is working on a big project right now, and Emily won the school science competition last week. She's just like me. She loves plants. I need to come and visit you all," I said. "I haven't seen Emily and Adam in a while." "Actually," she said, stopping in front of a case of purple orchids, her voice filled with excitement. "I wanted to invite you to dinner tonight. We have some news we'd like to share with you." "I'd love to," I said. "Something good, I hope?" "Very," she smiled mysteriously. "But the rest is for dinner. Be there at 6. Adam's making his famous lasagna." I drove home with a sense of purpose. I was looking forward to seeing my family, the part of my family that loved and respected me for who I was. At 6 o'clock sharp, I pulled up to a modern Brooklyn Heights apartment complex, a striking structure of glass and concrete. Clara and her family had recently bought an apartment here, and I was still in awe that my daughter, with her unprofitable profession, lived in one of the city's most prestigious neighborhoods. Emily, my 6-year-old granddaughter, met me at the front door. "Grandma," she cried, rushing out to wrap her arms around my waist. "Come on. Dad's making lasagna, and I helped with the salad." I hugged her, marveling at how fast she was growing. We took the elevator up to the 10th floor, and as soon as the door opened, the scent of Italian spices filled the air. Adam came out of the kitchen, wiping his hands on a towel. He was tall, with kind eyes that reminded me of Owen's younger brother. "Rose, good to see you," he said, giving me a hug. The lasagna's almost ready. Emily, show Grandma your new drawings. As Emily pulled me into the living room, I looked around the apartment. It was a spacious, bright two-bedroom with panoramic windows overlooking the city park. The furniture was modern and minimalist, but personal touches were everywhere. Family photos, stacks of books, a child's drawing tacked to the refrigerator. It was a home filled with love, a stark contrast to Daniel and Veronica's perfectly furnished, but cold, house. Over dinner, which was delicious, the conversation was easy and natural. Emily talked about school, Adam joked about his coworkers, and Clara shared funny stories about visitors to the botanical garden. After dinner, Emily settled in a corner with her father for a board game, leaving Clara and me to clear the table. So, I said, helping her load the dishwasher. What's the big news? Clara practically glowed with happiness. Remember I told you that we love this complex? Well, an apartment on the 9th floor, right below us, is for sale. It's a studio with a terrace and a view of the park. She paused, then added with obvious excitement. Adam and I were thinking, maybe you'd like to move there. To be closer to us. To Emily. I looked at her in surprise. Move here? But, Clara, I have the house. A house that's too big for you alone, she said softly. And one that requires constant upkeep. Imagine having no worries about a leaky roof or broken pipes. Everything new, modern, comfortable. And we'll be right next door, just one floor up. Adam, noticing our serious conversation, came over to us. Has Clara told you about our idea? He asked, a warm smile on his face. Rose, this really is a great place. I've seen the apartment. It's a real gem. But how can I afford an apartment like that? I asked. Even if I sell the house. The house and the beach house are worth a lot more than this apartment, Adam explained. You could buy it without a mortgage and still have money left over. I thought about it. I'd resisted the idea of selling before, especially when Daniel suggested it. But now, coming from Clara and Adam, it sounded different. It wasn't about selling an asset, it was about starting a new life with the part of my family that truly valued me. Let me show you, Clara said, pulling a glossy booklet from a drawer. She spread it out on the table, showing me bright, modern apartments with panoramic windows and beautiful views. Then she showed me a map of the complex with its park, pond, bike paths, and other amenities. And here is our apartment, she pointed to a floor plan. And here's the one on the 9th floor we're talking about. I studied the booklet, and with each page, the idea grew more and more appealing. To live in a modern apartment without the worries of a big old house, to be close to Clara, Adam, and Emily, and to dispose of my property as I chose, not at Daniel's behest. It's very tempting, I admitted, but I needed time to think. It's a big decision. Of course, Mom, Clara said, hugging me. We just wanted you to know about the possibility. Imagine how great it would be, Adam added. Emily could come over after school, we could have dinner together, go to the park, and no Daniel telling you what to do and how to do it. Emily, hearing her uncle's name, wrinkled her nose. Uncle Daniel is always so serious, she said, her childlike candor piercing through the tension. And Aunt Veronica never really smiles. Clara tried to look stern, but I could see she was holding back a laugh. Emily, don't talk about relatives like that. But it's true, Emily insisted. Grandma, if you live near us, we can see each other every day. Looking at my granddaughter's enthusiastic face, I felt something warm blossom in my chest. Maybe this was what I needed. A new beginning next to the people who truly loved me. I'll seriously consider your offer, I said, and I meant it. And I'll call a realtor tomorrow to see what my house and beach house might be worth. Clara glowed, and Adam nodded in approval. The rest of the evening passed in a warm family atmosphere. On the way home, I couldn't stop thinking about Clara's proposal. The Brooklyn Heights complex was impressive. To live so close to my daughter and granddaughter, to be a part of their lives, filled me with a deep sense of joy. The decision to sell the house where I had spent most of my life with Owen wasn't easy, but perhaps it was time to move on, to start a new chapter. I was ready to leave the past behind, keeping only the memories in my heart. My call to Hugo Prescott, a realtor Owen and I had worked with before, was the first concrete step in my new plan. I was surprised by my own determination. "Hugo, I'm thinking of selling the beach house and maybe the main house too," I told him, the words feeling both foreign and thrilling. He immediately agreed to meet, and we arranged to talk that very afternoon. When Hugo arrived, he found me with a stack of paperwork ready. We settled into the living room, a place that held so many memories, and I laid out my intentions. I told him about Clara's offer, about the Brooklyn Heights apartment, and my desire to start a new chapter. Hugo listened intently, nodding and taking notes. "Brooklyn Heights is an excellent choice," he said. "What do you think of my idea to sell both houses and the car? Would I have enough to buy an apartment there?" He did some quick calculations in his notebook, then looked up and smiled. "Rose, I'm pretty sure the proceeds from the sale will more than cover the cost of the Brooklyn Heights apartment. You'll have a decent amount left over." Something inside me relaxed. It was one thing to dream, another to know it was financially possible. We started with the beach house, which sold surprisingly quickly. A young couple fell in love with it, and I felt a strange sense of relief, watching them make plans. The cabin deserved to be filled with life and laughter again. My car also sold for a good price. The main house was a little more complicated, but after some light renovations suggested by Hugo, we found a buyer. A family with 2 teenage children looking for a spacious home in a good neighborhood. Throughout this entire process, I didn't tell Daniel about my plans. Part of me wanted to, but the part that was still hurt by his controlling behavior preferred to keep it a secret. I wanted to show him that I was capable of making my own decisions, and I didn't need his permission or approval. Clara, on the other hand, was my confidant. She helped me sort through my belongings, a strangely liberating process of shedding decades of accumulated things. "I take my memories with me, dear," I told her, putting aside Owen's letters and photographs. "Things are just things." Finally, almost 2 months after my first conversation with Hugo, all the papers were signed. I had sold 2 houses and a car, and the money was in my account. I felt a mixture of relief, excitement, and a little sadness, but above all, a powerful sense of freedom. The next day, I met Hugo and Clara at the Brooklyn Heights sales office. "We are pleased to welcome you," the sales manager, Vivian, said. "You're interested in apartment 902? "Yes," Clara confirmed. "It's 1 floor below ours." Vivian showed us the apartment, and I held my breath as I walked inside. The space was filled with light, thanks to the floor-to-ceiling windows. It was smaller than my old house, but felt spacious and airy, with a beautiful view of the city park. Everything was new, modern, and perfectly laid out. "It's perfect," I said, my voice full of emotion. We returned to the office and Hugo helped me with the paperwork. Given that I was paying in full, Vivian offered a small discount. "When can I move in?" I asked, feeling my impatience grow. "The apartment is completely ready," she answered. "As soon as we complete the formalities, you can move in." Walking out, I felt as if I had just taken the most important step of my life since marrying Owen. It was scary, but exhilarating. I knew I had made the right choice. My new life was about to begin, and I was ready. A few weeks later, when most of my belongings had been moved to the new apartment, Daniel called. I hadn't spoken to him since our last argument, and his voice sounded unusually excited. "Mom, I have great news," he said. "I sold your beach house and car. Got a very good price for both." His tone was so smug, I could almost see him smiling. I was silent, trying to process what I was hearing. He thought he had sold my property I no longer owned. "Are you there, Mom?" he asked when the pause lengthened. "Yes, Daniel. I'm here. I'm just trying to figure out how you managed to sell something that doesn't belong to you." "What? What are you talking about?" "We talked about this," he stammered. "We discussed it," I corrected him. "But I didn't give you permission to sell it. And more importantly, I sold both the beach house and the car 2 months ago." There was a long pause. "What?" he finally squeezed out. "Is this some kind of joke? If you don't believe me, call the registry office. They'll confirm that neither the cabin nor the car are in my name anymore," I replied, feeling a strange calm. "You have a problem, Daniel, because you sold something that didn't belong to you or me." "Mom," he said, his voice becoming strained. "If this is true, we have a serious problem. I've already gotten the money from the buyers. Then you do have a problem, I agreed. You created it yourself. He came over an hour later, with Veronica in tow. They were both pale and tense. They stopped in the doorway, looking at the half-empty living room. What's going on? Daniel asked, his voice higher than usual. I'm moving, I answered simply. Veronica's eyes widened. You sold the house? Yes, 3 weeks ago. The new owners move in 2 weeks. Where are you moving? Daniel asked, his voice shaking with barely contained anger. Brooklyn Heights, I said, a slight smile touching my lips as I watched his eyes widen in surprise. A lovely apartment on the 9th floor, overlooking the park. 1 floor below Clara and Adam's apartment. Veronica gasped. But it's one of the most expensive new developments in the city. Indeed, I agreed. But selling the 2 houses and the car brought in more than enough money to buy an apartment without a mortgage and still have some left over. Daniel looked at me as if he were seeing me for the first time. His face changed from shock to disbelief, then to panic. Mom, I already got the money for the beach house and the car. The full amount. The buyers expect me to hand over the paperwork. Yes, that's a problem, I said, leaning forward. A problem you created by selling something you don't own. You have to help me, he suddenly exclaimed. This is your fault. My fault? How can my successful business deal be my fault? You should have told me, he was almost shouting now. No, I didn't have to, I replied calmly. It's my property. I don't have to answer to you about what I do with it. I'm a capable adult, and I make my own decisions. I'm your son. Of course you have to consult me on important decisions. No, Daniel, I don't, I said firmly. And in case you're wondering, I'm looking forward to moving in. No more worries about a leaky roof or broken plumbing. Everything is new, modern, comfortable. And yes, I'll be close to Clara, Adam, and Emily, who, unlike some, respect my right to make my own decisions. Suddenly, Veronica, who had been listening to our exchange in silent fury, turned to Daniel. You sold the property without the proper paperwork? I had a power of attorney, he defended himself. From our family lawyer, Mr. Burton. You mean a forged power of attorney? I clarified. Because I never signed a power of attorney in your name, Daniel. Never. His face turned ash gray. Burton said it was standard procedure, that since you were a widow and I was your eldest son, I had the right to. You forged documents? Veronica jumped up from the couch, her eyes blazing. Do you realize that's a felony, Daniel? Forgery? Fraud? Selling someone else's property? I watched their argument with a growing discomfort. Daniel, who had so loved controlling others, had now completely lost control of the situation. I think you'd better continue this conversation at home, I said, rising from my chair. I still have a lot to do in preparation for the move. They both turned to me, as if they had just become aware of my presence. Veronica left without another word. Daniel lingered, a mixture of anger, resentment, and fear on his face. Mom, he began, but I shook my head. Not now, Daniel. You need to deal with the problem you created. He just nodded, then walked out. I felt no gloating, only a strange mix of sadness and relief. Despite his flaws, he was my son, and it pained me to see him in such a crisis. But at the same time, I felt strangely free. The last threads that had bound me to the past, to a life where I let others decide for me, had finally been severed. My moving day was sunny and warm. I took one last walk around the house that had been my home for nearly 4 decades. The empty rooms echoed with my footsteps, and I felt a mixture of nostalgia and relief. I didn't cry. All my tears had been cried long ago. Now, I was ready to move on. When I closed the door behind me for the last time, Clara was waiting for me. Are you okay, Mom? She asked, hugging me. More than okay, I smiled. Let's go. Life in Brooklyn Heights was even better than I expected. My new apartment was perfect, and the complex was designed to maximize residents' comfort. Within the first month, I had discovered yoga for seniors, a book club, and weekly movie nights. I made fast friends with several neighbors, especially Eleanor, a former literature teacher who lived next door. My relationship with Daniel, meanwhile, remained tense and brief. I knew he was facing serious financial problems due to the need to repay the buyers. Clara told me he and Veronica had been fighting constantly. I felt regret, but not guilt. Daniel had created this problem by his own actions. While it pained me to see my son suffer, I knew I couldn't save him from the consequences of his own decisions. About 3 months after I moved in, I was returning from yoga when the concierge, Michael, stopped me. "Mrs. Holloway, you have a visitor. Your son." I was surprised. Daniel had never come to Brooklyn Heights before. I found him in the lobby bar, looking pale and gaunt. When he saw me, he stood up abruptly. "Mom, finally. I thought you were avoiding me." "I was at yoga," I explained, sitting down at a table. "What brings you here, Daniel?" He hesitated, then blurted out. "Mom, I need your help. The loan I took out to pay back the buyers. The interest rate is killing me. And Veronica, she left me. She filed for divorce." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said sincerely. "She said she could no longer live with a man who was not only incompetent financially, but also so arrogant he refused to admit it." He paused, then looked at me, his eyes full of pleading. "I know you have money left over from selling the houses. I need a loan to refinance the loan. I'll pay it back with interest as soon as I stabilize the situation." I looked at him, at this grown man, my son, who always thought he knew best. Now he was in a situation he couldn't control. "Daniel," I said softly but firmly, "I can't give you that money." "Why not?" His face contorted with resentment. "You helped Clara with the mortgage. Why can she and I can't?" "It's not a matter of can or can't," I explained. "You don't need financial help. You need to learn to live within your means, to accept the consequences of your decisions, and most importantly, to stop trying to control things that don't belong to you. I am your son. Shouldn't you be helping me?" "I am helping you," I answered, "by not letting you escape the consequences of your actions. Sometimes the greatest help is to let a man find his own way out of a situation he's created." He sat in silence, then stood up abruptly. "I understand," he said dryly. "I'm sorry to bother you. You will always be my son, and I will always love you," I said. "But I will no longer indulge your desire to control everything around you, including me. When you're ready for a relationship based on mutual respect, I'll be happy to see you." He nodded without looking at me and walked out. I felt a strange mixture of sadness and calm. The conversation was hard but necessary. And, perhaps in the long run, it was the best thing I could do for him. That evening, Clara, Adam, Emily, and I had dinner together, as we did most nights. After dinner, when Emily went to her room, I told them about Daniel's visit. "He's in a bad situation," Clara sighed. "But you did the right thing, Mom." "I know," I said. "But that doesn't make the decision any less painful." Adam, who had been listening silently, suddenly got up and came back with a bottle of wine. "I think we could all use some," he said, pouring 3 glasses. We sat in cozy silence, sipping wine and looking at the city lights outside the window. "By the way," Adam said, as if remembering something, "I've been meaning to tell you for a long time, Rose. Do you remember when Clara and I offered you an apartment in our complex?" "Of course," I said. "It was the best offer I'd gotten in a long time." "Well, actually," he said, looking a little embarrassed, "if you hadn't had enough money from the house sales, we were planning to take out an additional mortgage and buy this apartment for you. We just wanted you to be here with us." I felt a lump in my throat and tears fill my eyes. My daughter and her husband were willing to take on an extra financial burden, not because they thought I was incapable, but simply out of love. "I don't know what to say," I mumbled. "We love you, Mom," Clara said simply, squeezing my hand. "And we want you to be a part of our daily lives, not just a weekend visitor." I hugged them both, overwhelmed with gratitude and love. In that moment, I knew without a shadow of a doubt that I had made the right choice. Not only in moving to Brooklyn Heights, but in the way I had chosen to live my life. It was a life of my own making, surrounded by the people who truly valued me for who I was. The light of a new life, a new beginning, filled my heart.